Mario Kart.
Now for Mario Kart 64, the first Mario Kart game I played. It was actually the first N64 game I ever played too. Every summer our primary school would have a fun day where they'd have stalls selling donated toys and stuff. And back in 1998 one of the stalls there was an N64 you could spend 10p or so for a few minutes of play. And I chose this game and had no idea how to play it before I ran out of time. Then when I got my own N64 a couple months later, this game was a regular rental from our local video shop in those few months where my only game was Mario 64, then later Banjo-Kazooie. Until Christmas when I got my own copy. It's still that very cartridge from 25 Christmases ago that I got this footage from. This was definitely the most played multiplayer game in our house back then. We did have games that me, my brother and my parents worked on together like Mario 64, Banjo and later Ocarina of Time and Final Fantasy VIII. But this was the only multiplayer game that all four of us would play at once. My parents would even have 4-player games with my uncle and his then girlfriend, which as far as I remember never happened with any other game. So what I'm getting at is that this was a pretty important game for little mid to late single digit age Ultra Kintaro. It's probably the Mario Kart I've played the most, but the main reason for that would be that I owned it longer, and since I missed Super Circuit when it was new, it was the most current Mario Kart game I owned for 6 years until we got Double Dash. But enough channel backstory, let's get into the game. In the transition from Super to 64, 150cc and the Special Cup are being made available from the start. With 4 cups and 8 characters, I'm going to use everyone at least once on the easier difficulties before swapping to a single character I can do well with 450cc on. The roster is mostly carried over from Super, with Donkey Kong Jr. swapped out with his son Forever and Wario replacing Koopa Trooper. I'll just start off simple with Mario, still one of only 2 middleweights in the game. And of course we're going in order with 50cc Mushroom Cup. First track is Luigi Raceway. For the most part, driving mechanics are similar to Super, but being in actual 3D instead of Mode 7, it feels a lot more smooth to me. Drifting is completely different though, but I'll save that for later difficulties. Many items return from Super: the mushroom for speed boosts, star for invincibility, banana peels to cause spin outs, Boo for stealing items, lightning for shrinking all of the racers. The green and red shells are back and function the same, but now you can actually fire shells backwards instead of just dropping them in the road. Mushrooms and both shells now have a triple version you can also grab, along with a bunch of 5 bananas. The new items I'll show off when I get to them. The items that didn't return from Super are the feather and the coins, with the coin mechanic being cut entirely. Items are now also found in respawning boxes instead of the one-time use panels on the floor from Super. As for Luigi Raceway itself, it's a very basic track, but it needs to be considering this would have been many people's first experience with a 3D racing game. It's mostly a simple loop going left with a dip to the right halfway through where you enter this tunnel. An okay start to the game, but far from the game's most memorable. This also starts a trend through a few future games of having the easy first track be named after Luigi, with the Mario circuit being slightly harder later on. But thanks to my lack of internet, the curiosity I had as a child, and an obsession with unlocking characters, many tracks had some minor aspect that I used to obsess over and convince myself that they were tied to a secret character. In this track's case, it's this hot air balloon that occasionally lowers down to the track holding an item box. I could never grab this thing and once spent an afternoon trying to get the timing right to grab that box, and all it is a guaranteed spiny shell. I was so disappointed after all that effort. Didn't stop me with other tracks though. On 50cc, it's very easy to stay in front the entire time, even with your rubber banding designated AI rivals always breathing down your neck. But just holding out a shell or banana behind yourself and letting them drive into it deals with that easy enough on this difficulty. Right before I finish first, I grab a fake item box, which will explode on contact with anyone who drives into it, making it best to drop it around real boxes. When it comes to points after the match, first place gets 9, second place 6, third place 3, fourth 1 and 0 to the rest. Moving on, Mushroom Cup's second track is Moo Moo Farm. This track has an even simpler layout than Luigi Raceway, being a circle with a couple slight left turns and a much wider track. However, the track isn't flat and has several bumps that can mess with your speed if you come at them at the wrong angle. Plus there's a couple spots where you'll see holes in the ground that Monty Moles can pop out of and send you flying. It's best not to look at those molehills and think, I could make it, because you will be unlucky and have one pop out at you right before finishing the race in first and give 2 or 3 other players the chance to cross the finish line while you're still zooming through the air. I'm not bitter, it's not like I had a scrap recording because it happened twice in a row and I refused to finish third on the second track of 50cc because of one bit of bad timing. This track's main contribution to the Mario series as a whole, aside from it getting essentially a sequel track in a later game, is the 2D sprites of these cows off track. The Moo Moos the farm is named for make their debut on this track and have appeared in nearly every Mario Kart game since and a couple other spin-offs. They're cute, make them playable in the next game. I like this track. It's got upbeat music, and at higher speeds when every player is bouncing about from bumps or being sent flying from Monty Moles, it's a good time. This track did not have something I convinced myself had a tie to unlocking something. Although when I got the internet, I did see a lot of fake cheats on websites relating to taking out the moles. This was one of those cases where I was never convinced though. When it comes to this playthrough, I stayed in front through most of it, but held on to a triple red shell as I was so paranoid after those 2 failed attempts I mentioned. It turned out to be the right choice, as Bowser gently overtook me when the finish was in sight, and so I made him pay and ensured I finished first. Everyone finished in the same position, so I ended up with a 6-point lead over Bowser in second. The third track is Koopa Troopa Beach, named for the large Koopa shaped rock you can see at the start that I never noticed for years until a panning shot when I first saw the credits. That rock is actually the only Koopa Troopa on the track, and in the game, with the character being axed from the roster. Also at this point I'm still trying to remember the start boost timing since they keep changing it every game. We've got the sea off to the right, which will slow you down and then eventually result in Lakitu dragging you out if you get too far. Early on we have these ramps with one being used as a shortcut, but I'm not risking it now at 50cc speed. That also goes to the large thin ramp past it that leads to a single item box. No chance. I still ran myself into the palm trees and spin myself out though. Then there's a couple more ramps before the end of the lap, avoiding the little crabs by the water as they will make me spin out too. I always had a fondness for this one, mainly thanks to the shortcut I mentioned. It's out in the open but tough enough to do on the slower speeds that for a child, making the shortcut felt like a huge achievement. As for going through the track, I made several mistakes in the first lap that allowed Toad to get a huge lead. That can happen with the AI in this game, everyone else focusing on hindering you and they end up all holding each other back while one of them speeds off unchallenged. But I managed to overtake him near the end of the second lap. Me and Toad are neck and neck through most of the final lap, but my strategy of letting the AI drive into my held item keeps them from doing too well. As I'm about to finish, I catch on the recording the true Mario Kart 64 experience. Yeah, as much as I love this game, god damn it pisses me off when this happens and I've never gotten over it. I'll get into it later, but I do think Mario Kart 64 has the most infuriating AI in the series. It's like the Mortal Kombat 2 of Mario Kart. Well, thanks to how points have been distributed, all I have to do to win the cup is to place above Bowser. No one else can catch up, so even if I finish 4th, I'll win as long as Bowser finishes 5th. And to finish off the cup, we have my favourite track in it, Kalimari Desert. Don't let the map fool you, it's actually more simple than it looks. Drive around this turn for a bit and get a train crossing. Sometimes the train won't be there, sometimes you'll be able to squeeze through, other times you'll have to wait or you'll get hit flying. Past it there's another crossing further on. The best part about this is that if the train is blocking the road, the AI don't know how to wait and will always drive themselves into the side of the train. The fact I got a triple mushroom just as my rivals were ramming their stupid asses into a train made it even better. Then the rest of the track is pretty straightforward. Yeah, the train makes this my favourite track in the cup, plus the desert sunset and the music just give it a very memorable atmosphere to me. There are a few tracks in this game where the music gives a vibe that just feels different to any other Mario Kart game. You can actually get on the train tracks and drive through the tunnel. It's not at all recommended, but you can. That's pretty much it. Once I took the lead with the triple mushroom, I kept that massive lead for the entire rest of the race. I didn't even need to worry about Bowser either, he fell below 4th place and gained no new points. First seeing the victory ceremony as a kid blew my mind. I'd played Mario All-Stars, World, Land 2 and 64, and specific locations returning between those wasn't really a thing, so I was never expecting to see Peach's Castle from 64 looking exactly as it did in that game again. We get the giant floating blimp Cheep Cheep once again and it spits me out my gold cup. And this time he's unharmed. No booze in this game, only promotional art. With the Mushroom Cup out of the way for the first time, let's go through those heavy characters since I'm not as good with them on higher difficulties in this game. I choose Bowser and go for Flower Cup, starting with Toad's Turnpike. Last time we ended the cup on my favourite track, this time we're starting on it. I finally get the start boost timing with pressing accelerate between the second and third light. The track is a figure 8 where I'm avoiding some big traffic and all the items are in little openings in the fence. This is some massive traffic by the way, especially when you compare how big Bowser can be to them. How many floors are on them buses? The reason this track is my favourite of the cup is not just the weaving through traffic, but like Kalimari Desert, the atmosphere. What I said about that track's music applies here too, and it works so well when mixed with the night sky. What this also is the start of tracks being given seemingly random branding of one of the playable cast. Yeah, there's the odd picture of Toad on some signs, but what makes this Toad's? Since when did Toad own a motorway? This is a track I was pretty much in first place throughout the entirety of. I got several banana bunches to keep my 2 heavyweight rivals away from me and easily won the race. For the second track we have Frappe Snowland. We start off with a few turns, getting to see the giant snow Yoshi and having to avoid an explosive snowman. After a few turns of this, I jump a small river and get to see the giant snow Mario and its surrounding army of explosive snowmen. Past that is a few more turns followed by a big wall of snow rising up on both sides of the road. Through this tunnel we have one last bridge before the end of the lap. This track is a nighttime snow level, so of course I'm fond of it. The music for this game's snowy tracks is also one of the most memorable snow level themes out there for me. That having been said, as a kid I wasn't that fond of this track at first. I simply could not avoid those snowmen in the open field of them, and it would stress me out. This track is kind of infamous for being broken with unintended shortcuts that let you finish it in seconds, but I didn't bother trying them out this time. When it came to my obsession with trying to force secrets where there were none, I did for a bit believe that maybe I could knock down the giant snow Mario to find a new character or something. While I'm at it, I've always seen an angry face when I look at the back of Bowser's cart. The third pair of spikes on his shell above the exhaust look like a pair of angry eyes with the spikes between them looking like a nose. Then the reddish frame of his cart looks like a frowning mouth. Except for a little moment near the end of the third lap, I once again stay in front through just about all of it. Once again my second and third place rivals keep their positions. The third track of this cup is Choco Mountain. The majority of the track is spent with tall walls on either side of the road, making driving off-road not a thing. After a few turns we drive through this tunnel and a bit further on we have this fenced road with giant boulders falling down that will flatten me if they land on me. During this we turn around and go uphill, driving alongside the previous section of the track. It's a short part, but when next to the fence there is a risk of an item knocking you over the fence and sending you back a big chunk of the track. After that we have several ramps and the end of the lap. So right away I'm going to start with my childhood secret conspiracy theory about this track. The tunnel at the start has these two holes above it that look like eyes. On my small 90s TV I couldn't see that they're not very deep and had walls. I thought they were also full-length tunnels. I was certain that there was something in there, and when I played Super and saw the feather item, I convinced myself that it was removed specifically to prevent us from jumping up there and seeing what was inside. 6-year-olds don't tend to know how game development works. This track is a bit like Moo Moo Farm for me. Not my favourite in the cup, but helped out by some really upbeat music while you're bouncing around on those ramps. After a few slip-ups on the first lap, once I take first place on this track, I never let go for the rest of the race. Due to me, Wario and DK having the same position 3 times in a row, I end up 9 points ahead, making it impossible to finish the cup in any rank other than first. That just leaves Mario Raceway. This track in terms of layout is the most complex of the cup, with a lot of turns, but to make up for it, it has no real hazards aside from being able to bump into off-road piranha plants. The only big visual landmarks are the giant mushroom statue hiding a minor shortcut and the tunnel near the end. This has a side effect of making it, for me, the least memorable track in the cup, but at the same time one of the more fun ones for purely driving. And like how Luigi Raceway being first set a trend for Luigi themed circuits starting the game, Mario Raceway set a trend for the Mario themed circuits being in the second cup, even in games that lacked a Luigi circuit successor. This also brings up the big change from Super in that each track is unique rather than a small set of track types with multiple versions. Even the 3 raceways, which share some slight similarities beyond using the same music, are very different. This not only makes each track more memorable, but it also makes it much easier to have something to write about each track. If you remember the Super Mario Kart video, I was resorting to reminiscing about long privated Retsu praise just to have something to say about a track. Once again I stay in the lead throughout the entire race, coming in first and finishing the cup with a full 36 points. That's 50cc, 50% done. Continuing through the heavyweights, newcomer the current Donkey Kong for the Star Cup, my favourite cup in the game overall, and we start with Wario Stadium. Wario Stadium is one of the longest tracks in the game, second only to this game's Rainbow Road. It's a long dirt track with a lot of ramps in the road and endless pictures of a grinning Wario along the outer wall. I really enjoy this track for all the ramp jumping I'm doing, but because there's not much in terms of hazards, I'm once again left without much to say. What is notable is the large jump near the end of the lap for how much it screws you if you fail. You fall back onto a section of track much further back. This stands out for how little this series tends to include big punishments like this. I had the feeling that when this track returns to Mario Kart 9 or whatever it's called, failing that jump won't be so punishing. Well, I assume this track will be in the next game. It's the only N64 track to have never been brought back, it has to be. I do have quite a bit of nostalgia for this track for being the true first track I played. When I had my 10 pences worth of time at that school fun day, I was put on Luigi Raceway, but I was so bad and didn't get long enough to remember it. When we rented this game and I actually had time to enjoy it, this was the first track I chose. We only had 2 controllers back then, so it was me and my dad. He was Mario and I was Wario because I'd been hearing about Wario all the time but never been exposed to him and was fascinated by this evil Mario. So of course I also chose the Wario track. My dad won. But let's also talk about Donkey Kong, because I somehow made it to the 200th game before playing something with the main Donkey Kong in it. It was interesting when I first got the internet and saw there were people who considered Donkey Kong and Mario to be two wholly separate things. But for me, I'd always registered Donkey Kong as a Mario character even before playing this game, which I think is the first actual game I've seen him in. But I can't remember where I first heard of Donkey Kong because I never played the country games until I was 10. It was either seeing my uncle's NES Donkey Kong Classics cartridge on the floor and seeing him and Mario on the label, or from watching the Donkey Kong Country CG cartoon. I feel I had to have watched that before this game because I also knew of Diddy Kong before playing this game. But it's too far back now to remember clearly, so let's move on to who Donkey Kong replaced. And I'm not talking about Junior. Kamek being in early build and replaced with DK is probably one of the more well-known cases of a cut character out there these days. While I do admit that DK was the better inclusion, for the longest time I did think it was a shame that Kamek missed out on his playable debut. But he got it a decade and a half later and then finally got in a kart game another decade later, so it's fine. Once again I stay in the lead all race and learned that Mario and Toad are my rivals this time. Next we have Sherbet Land, same music as Frappe Snowland but ice themed instead of snow. This one is kind of a successor to the Vanilla Lake tracks from the first game. I start off driving anti-clockwise on the ice around this big lake, dodging the penguins from Mario 64. Then after driving past a big boulder, I enter a cave where I have pillars and more penguins to avoid. Once I'm outside, it's anti-clockwise a little more to reach the end of the lap. Now, first of all, see this big penguin on its own on a secluded bit of ice? Yep, that's another thing I convinced myself held some kind of secret. I spent ages in time trial and versus using any combination of items to try and land on it, expecting that maybe I would unlock that penguin as a playable character. And after so much effort, I made it, only for Lakitu to pick me up and place me back on the track. I was so disappointed, but I only had myself to blame for convincing myself with all these nonsensical ideas. That said, I do want a penguin to be made playable in a future Mario Kart, or at least one of the other spin-offs. They've been recurring long enough and I think they deserve at least one go. I quite like this track, but it is my least favourite of Star Cup just for being overshadowed by the other three. I still love that music and I enjoy dodging penguins, though it is the most simple track of the cup. One touch I like is that if you fall in the lake, you'll be frozen inside a huge ice cube when the Lakitu drags you out. As for my performance, a bunch of bananas carry me through a huge chunk of it and I never come under any threat past bumping into a penguin on the first lap. Third, we have the last of the Raceway type tracks with Royal Raceway. The first chunk of the race starts on a narrow road with a slope that risks dropping you into water on the left. Once the river ends, I'm going slightly uphill and through some turns with piranha plants beside the road. Eventually this takes me to the huge ramp with the big speed boost panels. It takes me over the river and drops me near Peach's castle, we'll get to that in a bit. Past that we have a few more turns, including one sharp one that even 25 years later I can never seem to get right, before I make it back to the start. So the reason I love this stage so much. After that jump you can actually drive around the courtyard of Peach's castle from Mario 64. It exists as part of the victory ceremony, so why not let us drive around it? Of course you can't get inside, that door is just a texture. Didn't stop me trying to break through with a star or using a boot to phase through. Another case of me not knowing how games worked, and me being certain that the entire Mario 64 interior would still be there if I could just get inside. It being there added a lot to the track's identity, so you can imagine my disappointment when they fenced off the castle in Mario Kart 8. I get why, as it served no gameplay purpose and probably messed with a lot of beginner players and screwed them over, but here's my counterpoint. So fucking what? Not that the rest of the track is bad at all, it's a perfectly good track. I just really liked messing around with this part. I come in first again despite my best efforts. I decide to release a red shell so I can use my mushroom to finish a bit quicker, only for the shell to hit myself. Luckily I sent myself flying over the finish. Once again it's now impossible for me to not finish the Grand Prix first. That just leaves my favourite track in the game, Bowser's Castle. We start on this bridge and go through the entrance into the courtyard with a fire-breathing Bowser statue, clearly just the Mario 64 model retextured. Then into the castle itself, avoiding a couple of thwomps and him. We'll get to him. Continue driving through the halls into this one with 3 thwomps, 2 of which follow you and try to drop in front of you near the end, and 1 that tries to block the exit. Next room is more Bowser statues and thwomps sliding side to side and laughing their asses off. We have a narrow rope bridge over lava and dropping down some stairs decorated with the same stock Mario Bros. 3 artwork. Then we end up back outside and driving through another courtyard before I'm going across another bridge over more lava and up this winding tower. At the end I jump 2 more gaps while descending before I turn a corner and end up back at the start. I think my description should explain why this is my favourite track. There's just so much that goes on compared to the others without it being too much. And it's got that atmosphere. I love the music and that purple sky that makes it look like a Mortal Kombat 2 stage. The thwomps make a memorable appearance here, especially when they laugh at you if you bump into them. And yes, I know that their laugh is Wario's pitch down, which means their laugh is different in Japanese where he has his original Mario Party actor. Did you also know that Mario 2 is duck? I especially love the latter half of the level. Going down those stairs and speeding up that tower before jumping buildings makes it feel like you start the track breaking into the castle and now you're escaping by the end. One thing I'd like to bring up is that this track is the final track of Star Cup. After this game it becomes tradition to have Bowser's Castle be the third track of Special Cup, making it the second to last track in the game. Honestly, I prefer it being here. It allows it to feel like a climactic track in its own right, being last in the second to last cup. Its placement in later games always led to it, for me, being overshadowed by Rainbow Road right after. There's a reason this is still the most memorable Bowser's Castle stage for me, and that's because the game's ultimate track isn't starting seconds after being done with it. Now let's talk about that guy, the green thwomp behind bars near the start. This dude drove me mad trying to work out how to free him. You can't break through the bars with a star, you can't phase through with a boo. All you get is him laughing at you for trying. I felt so vindicated when I got the internet and found other people were obsessed with him. There are no other green thwomps in the series, so it seemed like he was placed there for a reason. Now I did not know he'd been nicknamed Marty for years, or that people thought he was an unlockable character. I thought freeing him would unlock me a character, but I never actually considered it to be him. I mean, he's got no hands, how's he gonna drive? It also blew my mind when I learned that he technically isn't even a green thwomp. There is no green thwomp model in the game. He's a normal thwomp and the cell he's in has yellow lighting that makes him look green. But you know what? I want a green thwomp to be playable in a future game, just to give closure to that childhood obsession. And I don't mean a regular spiked thwomp, it has to be the smoother, squarer, more neutral expressioned N64 style thwomp that hasn't been seen since the Wii days. I've actually always preferred that look for them. I mean, they're blue. Regular ones are grey. Obviously it won't actually happen. When Nintendo want to do a bit of fan service or appeal to nostalgia, it's generally not weird niche stuff like this that a few introverted kids were driving themselves mad over. Even when this track was remade for the Wii and they gave the thwomps their classic spike design, the jailed one was not green. And I wonder if it was a deliberate choice to avoid giving the whole thing some legitimacy. Because if that thwomp was green on the Wii, I feel we'd have a new generation of kids who would obsessed over him and they'd be old enough now to be genuinely asking for him. Why is it always the green palette swaps hidden in the background that get this? I want Green Thwomp and Hornbuckle to get their own team-up game where they try and force their way into legitimacy. As for the race itself, I made a few mistakes on the first lap that allowed Toad to gain a massive lead, but I caught up. Near the end of the final lap I gained my first golden mushroom, which grants infinite speed boosts over a limited amount of time. Always a joy to get, but of course if you're good, you won't see it often. Well, that's another full 36 points and 3 out of 4 50cc gold trophies. That just leaves the Special Cup and the last heavyweight character in Wario, and the first track is DK Jungle Parkway. We start off driving clockwise with the river off to the left before it gets replaced by a fence as we start going uphill and reach a boost pad that sends us to the other side of the river. From there we get driving deeper into the jungle, where going too far to one side of the road or just off road at all will result in being pelted by coconuts thrown in from off screen. This part goes on for a bit through a few turns and even has a short bit next to the river again before we go deeper and downhill to a very narrow rope bridge leading into a cave. In the cave you need to drive to the opposite wall and up the slope that starts there to end up back at the beginning. I remember as a kid I was mixed on this track. Shooting over the river was so fun to me, but because I was terrible at steering, I was always getting my ass kicked by coconuts and I took it really personally. But once I learned to turn I could fully enjoy it. I'm always trying to see how far I can push it in terms of how much of a dirt slope in the cave I can skip before it makes me free fall down. This track actually gave me two obsessions as a kid. First is the ship with Mario's name that floats up and down the river. I was always trying to land on it so I could drive around and explore it and find the secret character that's obviously hiding in there. As for the other, I remember seeing what looked like a little bit of land in a corner in the river below the rope bridge, but I couldn't find it playing again. Me and my brother once spent a couple days in time trial trying to land on it using the mushroom boosts. I honestly can't remember if we ever did, but if we did it would have just resulted in Lakitu carrying us back. I was certain that landing on it would unlock Diddy Kong specifically. I never got this conspiracy brained with any other game I've ever played. The race goes like most of the rest and I finish first. This brings us to Yoshi Valley, a very memorable stage in its original form as, for one thing, the game can't actually keep track of what position anyone is in. That's because this stage has several routes and the game doesn't know what to make of it when everyone goes their own way. On entering the valley, I first turn left and then right where I failed to avoid spinning out on these porcupines, then left through a tunnel and driving into more porcupines. At this point all the routes converge and I have this road mostly without fences as I turn around and drive towards the end of the valley, with this moving giant Yoshi egg risking flattening me. Once I cross the bridge, I'm back on grassland and have a drive uphill to the start of the next lap. This was always a fun one for the amount of routes through the track, even if some were clearly better than others. This track is a funny case in which it seems everyone else on the internet made up an unlockable relating to something I didn't for once. The amount of run over all the porcupines to unlock Koopa Trooper claims I saw when I got the internet was surprising. And it was always Koopa Trooper, but considering the conclusions I've jumped to that I've talked about, I can't really make fun. My obsession was with the giant Yoshi egg near the end. I just knew that there was some way to break it open and make it hatch all the existing Yoshi colours to make them all playable. But no, ramming into it with the star just has it shoot into the air and fall back down. This still feels like a more natural conclusion to reach than running over hedgehogs to unlock a turtle, at least. Despite the game's inability to decipher position, it becomes pretty clear in the first lap that I'm first for most of the race. Donkey Kong was always nudging at my arse and getting the odd couple seconds of overtaking, but it doesn't stop me from winning. And because DK and Bowser swapped places from the first race, they've both cannibalised their own points and left me to get a 9-point lead already. The third track for Special Cup is Banshee Boardwalk, the successor to the Ghost Valley tracks from the first game. This track is mostly a narrow road with the sharpest turns in the game, some of which lack guardrails to make it easier to fall off, including one stretch with no rails on either side. If you can get the timing right, you can hop the corners of those turns, but you do risk falling off the track. After this, we enter a dilapidated building with a dumpster spewing bats that can either knock you back or even make you spin out, and round the corner they fly out of this grate. Then after the next corner we go back outside and have the last couple turns before the start of the next lap. Honestly, while this is a fine track, it is my least favourite of Special Cup. Those turns really screw me over on faster speeds and I just don't find it as memorable as the other three. The Cheep Cheep that gives you trophies making a cameo is neat though. I did believe that the dumpster with the bats was also hiding a secret as a kid, that maybe I could break it open or launch myself inside, but it wasn't something I focused on as much as the other tracks. I let Donkey Kong take first place and he manages to keep it for a while until I eventually get it back for the rest of the race, only being overtaken for a few moments. I have a 12-point lead now, making it once again impossible to rank lower than first. And that leads us to the final track in the game, Rainbow Road. So description of this track is going to be a little different since it's so long. We start with a big slope down and throughout the entire track we have chain chomps charging towards the screen and they are very easy to get hit by. Really, the main draw to this track, at least for me, is all the line drawings of the casting the stars as you progress through it. There's a few long turns and going uphill, including a long uphill back to the top to start the second lap. I have seen the criticism of this track being boring, in that it's far longer than any other track in the game and is completely covered by guardrails, as opposed to the previous Rainbow Road having no rails at all. And while I get why that would be a problem for some, it just isn't for me. I consider this track more of a victory lap than anything else to making it this far. After Yoshi Valley and Banshee Boardwalk, you get this trippy rainbow coloured track, the celebration of the game's casting the stars and my absolute favourite piece of music in the game, and favourite Rainbow Road theme overall, and a contender for all-time top 5 bits of Mario Kart music. There's a reason 2 other games just straight up took a section of this track's theme and put it in their own Rainbow Roads. Normally, when people talk about video game soundtracks in the last decade and debate losing the gamey sound to them in favour of trying to sound like films, this is always the music that comes to my head. I haven't really heard much that sounds like Mario Kart 64 Rainbow Road in a long time. It all combines to create a track that feels like it was intended for you to wind down with, and it works for me. The visuals and the music make this a very relaxing track for me to play, although I would say that the length of the track is the track's challenge. I probably wouldn't call it my favourite Rainbow Road to play, but it's so different from all the others that it's hard to compare it against them. Once again I have DK nipping at my heels through most of it, but failing to stop me finishing first. With that 4th gold trophy, 50cc is complete. But before we move on to 100cc, let's have a look at the battle mode tracks, which I skipped over when talking about Super due to lacking a second player at the time and not really having anything to say about them anyway. Battle mode is the standard Bloom battle mode that has been in all the games. Get hit 3 times and you're out. In more than 2 player, the first players to lose turn into a mini bomb cart and can blow themselves up on the other players out of spite. If the second player's gameplay doesn't look too good, that's because I didn't have an extra controller with a good control stick, which meant he couldn't turn very well. I wasn't looking for amazing gameplay anyway, I just wanted footage of the arenas. First is Big Donut. It's a big circle with a hole filled with lava jam in the middle and some brick structures to use as cover. It's alright. What is a pain with versus mode in this game is that the game cannot handle more than 2 players and the soundtrack at the same time. Have an extra friend or 2 and you have to play in silence. I always liked the Lost portraits in this game, especially Wario biting his own hat. Next we have Block Fort, possibly the most iconic battle arena in the series. We have a square floor with 4 blocks that each have 2 floors each and bridges connecting them to 2 others. I can see why it was the most popular, with all the opportunities to escape from other players or drop on them from above. It's a fun one. Next we have Double Deck, the only arena to have never been brought back in a later game. We start with a raised platform in the middle, and after dropping off there's a bottom floor I can drive around, or a second floor leading to a top floor that contains a big hole leading back down to the starting platform. This is a perfect 4-player arena, with it being quite big and having a few corners you could hide around. But I think it's too big for 2 players. It ends up feeling like there's huge stretches of nothing until the 2 players run into each other. Finally, Skyscraper. It's a circular arena with a hole in the middle, with an outer ring connected to it by small bridges that leave a large gap around the centre platform. I've very rarely seen a game on this one that's actually won by pelting the other players with items. It always ends up being from falling off the stage so much because it's so easy to. Although I think the split screen doesn't help. It makes it so much harder to actually see the pits. Also, gotta love pouty model Yoshi when he loses. Now with that out of the way, I can move on to 100cc, in which I'll play as Luigi, the only other middleweight, the Mushroom Cup. It's with 100cc that I start pulling out the drift boosts. While drifting, a series of white E's will come out of your cart. Keep up the drift properly and they will turn yellow and then red. Letting go of the drift when the E's are red will get you a small boost of speed. It took a lot of time getting used to this one again after how the later games handle drift boosts. Don't try constant drifts while switching sides though, as wiggling yourself side to side too much will result in a spin out. So this was Luigi's first appearance on the N64 and in 3D, and he actually looks like himself instead of like Wallace from Wallace and Gromit like in the last game. I think the funniest part looking back is that this is the first time Charles Martinet voiced Luigi, whereas for a few years and in the Japanese version it would be Julian Bardakoff as what I used to see referred to as Helium Luigi. The same applies to Wario too, but the Wario voice here doesn't sound too far off from what it would be when Martinet became his voice permanently. But Luigi sounds totally different from how he'd be voiced later. Luigi's Mansion and his cowardly persona were still half a decade away, so Luigi here sounds way more confident than you would expect him to. But apart from that, 100cc isn't too much harder than 50cc, so I'm in first for most of the race and win. With Moo Moo Farm, I start swapping out the map for the border, which shows how fast each character is progressing through a track, and it really exposes how the AI will cheat, especially when we get to 150cc. Apart from an incredibly close call at the end of the final lap, nothing that notable happens. My rivals, Mario and Wario, also swap positions and helped me gain another big point lead again. In Koopa Troopa Beach, I get to use the shortcut when I mushroom boost up that ramp and into this cave that leads out through the waterfall and skips a significant portion of the track. Of course, I ram my stupid face into a tree and lose the lead I just gained. But it's okay, because my rivals were determined to either drive into my held items or throw bananas in front and drive into them themselves. As for Kalimari Desert, I get the closest call I've ever had on this track at the first train. However, I get hit by the second train and it screws me. Wario gains a huge lead while the 3 racers below him constantly pelt me and hold me back, leading to me finishing third. It doesn't matter as I had enough points to guarantee ranking first anyway. I next move on to the lightweights, starting with Yoshi for Flower Cup. Throughout this entire race I have Wario, Luigi and Peach fighting over which 2 of them will become the main rivals for this run. Yoshi's sort of in a weird middle ground in this game. He still uses the Mario World sound effects for his voice, as Kazumi Totaka hadn't yet recorded Yoshi's voice for Yoshi's Story. I can't remember if this is the only game on the N64 to be using these sounds, as the only others I remember are the first 2 Mario Party games where they gave him loads of chirping noises for some reason. In the end, Wario and Luigi became my rivals as I finished first. With Frappe Snowland I stay in first for nearly all of it, but on the 3rd lap I drive into the very last snowman in the field of them. Wario and Luigi get in front and a single banana then prevents me from catching up as I'm stuck having to settle for 3rd. For the first time I'm not leading on points as Wario is now 3 ahead of me. With Choco Mountain I take first place back at the end of the first lap and hold it all the way to the end, where I make the classic mistake of manually hopping on the last few bumps. This has me knock myself down on the edge of the mountain and Luigi swipes first place, making me settle for 2nd. Me, Wario and Luigi are now all tied at 18 points. For Mario Raceway I take first place back right away, and after spending the entire Grand Prix in 4th, Peach decides she wants to be a contender and becomes permanent 2nd place, always hanging out behind me and getting the odd couple seconds in front. But then in the very last few moments of the race, the pecking order reasserts itself and Wario and Luigi gain tremendous speed to push her back into 4th. I finished first though, give me that trophy. Toad next for 100cc Star Cup. This time I have 4 racers competing to be my rivals, none of them managing to keep hold of 2nd and 3rd until the final lap. Toad's voice is another one that's strange to come back to because he only sounds like this in this game. Some of his voice clips are even surprisingly deep for Toad compared to his voice in every other N64 game and the Japanese version of this one. It's funny how normal the current super scratchy Toad voice we've had for the last 20 or so years has become to me, because it was so jarring hearing it after being so used to this and the Mario Party voice. Luigi gets to stay being one of the rivals, but this time Yoshi is the other. For Sherbet Land I had several falls and bumps into penguins that almost had Yoshi finish before me, but a lucky star got me the win. That's something I like about this game, the item balance. Obviously you aren't going to get as good items in front as you would towards the back, but unlike later games, being in first or second doesn't sentence you to nothing but single banana peels and shells. You can get something good towards the front sometimes. Peach also managed to push her way into second, which screwed up my opponent's points even more than usual. For Royal Raceway I finally get my first spiny shell in the second lap. It travels through the track to hit the first place driver. While it does not actively seek out the other racers between me and them, it will also hit them if they happen to be in its path, which is usually dead centre of the road. This is still my favourite version of the spiny shell. It's very good while also being the least frustrating. It can hit others and doesn't just pick on first place. It causes damage like any other item rather than the long time wasting explosion of later games. But what's most important to me is that it's actually quite rare. When I complain about the spiny shell in later games, my biggest issue is how often it appears. This is my 7th Grand Prix and the first time seeing it appear. In later games I want to say you have a 75% chance in a single race of getting hit by this shell when you're in first place. I never felt punished for being in first in this game, while I did many times in several later games. It wasn't really a problem for me until Mario Kart Wii, where thanks to that game's item balance I'd get more frustrated from being hit with the spiny shell than I would in any other game. I'm sure most people who played that one have awful memories of that game's, "Oh, you're in first? Then take a blue shell, and then 3 more items in a row. Fuck you, drop down to 6th place in seconds." So while I've never been one to argue in favour of removing the spiny shell, I would prefer it be made a bit less common. Of course, the reason I got the spiny shell in the first place was because my first lap went poorly, but I managed to fight my way back up to first in the final lap and keep it to the end, fascinated by what Wario had to have been doing to end up so far behind. Peach dropped back to a 0-point place and I now have an impossible to lose with amount. With Bowser's Castle, 100cc adds a second thwomp to the end of the second hallway. I may as well bring up the game's graphics, because that is usually the first thing that comes up in regards to the game showing its age. It's mainly about the races themselves. Obviously I know now that the races are pre-rendered 2D sprites and not actual 3D models. But I think when playing on actual N64 hardware, the illusion works. I think they blend in with the stages perfectly fine without it being noticeable. Though I will say that getting pure side-on or front views of the characters did look off to me even back then. It's just that when I see HD emulator footage where you can pretty much see every edge of the sprites, so that they stand out so much and people are basing it off of that I take issue. The game was never supposed to look like that. It looked more like my slightly blurred recordings through composite cables here. That's not to say I think the sprites look amazing, I just think they don't look bad. Not that my placement matters on this race, but when Yoshi overtakes me on the last lap, I managed to get a lightning in second place and ensure my full 36 points. Just one more for this difficulty. That leaves Peach as the final lightweight and final character for 100cc Special Cup. With the DK Jungle Parkway race, I learn I can fall outside of the last bridge's ropes when Wario rams me with a star. Luckily I can just drive back through. This is one of only 3 games where Peach is voiced by Leslie Swan, the other 2 being both versions of Mario 64. I thought she worked for the ending cutscene in that game, but I was never that big on the voice in Mario Kart. Sounds a bit too normal compared to everyone else in the game and lacks their energy. I get the closest call ever here when Donkey Kong manages to keep first through the majority of the final lap, leaving me to try and cut off a chunk of the turn onto the final slope and witnessing DK drive straight into a banana, giving me the win. For Yoshi Valley I try a different route. I still go left at the start but decide to ignore the porcupines and keep moving forward across this narrow road with no fences. The following road then drops me back at where the rest all converge. It's more dangerous, but I don't find it any easier. Getting a triple mushroom and saving it for the end of the lap so I can skip a big chunk of the grassy hill was nice. Despite that, Yoshi still gets in front of me. The constant mushrooms weren't doing it, but a nice red shell gets me back in front. I go back to the porcupine route for the final lap. I stay in first, but near the end slip on a banana and go off the cliff for a long drop. This results in me finishing 5th. However, finishing below 4th does not let you progress and instead makes you restart the race. Something that makes things too easy, as you could just deliberately lose in later tracks for as many retries as you want. But I'll take it over the life system from the previous game. Next time I pretty much dominate and stay in first throughout the entire race. Now we're at 100cc Banshee Boardwalk. I've run out of filler and anecdotes, so all I have left is how the race went. It was all going well until lap 2, where I got cocky and thought I could jump this corner while drifting. It put me back into 4th and 5th, but on the last lap things look up when I get a spiny shell. I take out Wario, but in trying to steer around him I go off track again, which hinders me enough to make me finish 3rd. My points are tied with Wario. For Rainbow Road, I try and fail the skip at the beginning, putting me back into 6th. But I quickly make my way back up to 1st and keep it most of the time. I even manage to knock Wario back into 5th place during the 2nd lap, and he never actually recovers. Yoshi stays right behind me, but Wario just can't get any further than 4th. I have some horrible luck on lap 3 when I hit myself with my own shell and then get chain chomped right after. But right at the end I run into a banana peel. But if you let go of the control stick as soon as you make contact, you can recover and avoid the spin out. Yoshi overtakes, but I have a triple green shell to knock him out with and take the win at the last second. That's 100cc fully complete. We're into 150cc now and we're past showing off the game in its entirety. I'm sticking to Yoshi for the rest of the game. Starting with Mushroom Cup. Here we're at our fastest and the AI is at their prickest. Luigi Raceway I have no major strategy for, just keep up those drift boosts and be consistent. I mess up a few of them and Wario keeps getting in my way, but I manage to take 1st and keep Wario from overtaking right at the end of the race. Moo Moo Farm is pretty much the same, keep drift boosting and avoid Monty Moles. He's a perfect example of the AI's blatant cheating. I get hit and Toad overtakes. Seems fair so far, right? Now watch Toad's icon as he gains an impossible speed and gains a massive lead that no one can catch up to. Can't even red shell him as those items can be stupid and try cutting through the middle of the track, destroying themselves on walls. No amount of drift boosts and mushrooms can close that gap, so I have to settle for 2nd. This puts Toad in 2nd overall, 5 points behind me. For Koopa Troopa Beach, aside from drift boosts, the top speed granted by 150cc allows me to jump the ramp into the waterfall cave without a mushroom. However, first time I mess up and miss the ramp entirely. I make the shortcut on the 2nd lap and watch everyone else trying to rubber band back up to me. I'm fairly certain some of them are actually teleporting further along the track. I missed the ramp again on my 3rd try, but by that point it seems the AI has given up and accepted I'm going to win. Toad falling back into 4th gives me the 9-point lead I need to come 1st regardless. Kalimari Desert has me boosting towards that train crossing and think, I can make it. Turns out, I could not make it. Also, all the extra carriages for 150cc means it actually hits me twice. I also hit the 2nd train because I didn't brake fast enough. Strangely enough, Bowser and Wario end up falling so far back that the game gives up on them being my rivals and promotes 0 pointers Mario and Peach to that role. Whatever's going on towards the back, it lets me gain a massive lead boosting in 1st place while Mario and Peach stay glued to my behind. I finish 1st and get my first 150cc trophy, which is bigger and fancier than the trophies the previous 2 difficulties gave me. Flower Cup again. Of course, if you've seen a speedrun, you will know most of these tracks have some insane skips. But I'm not that good, I don't know how to do most of them and I hadn't even played this game in about a decade. So the best I can do for Toad's Turnpike is to drift boost while doing my best to avoid traffic. And even then I eventually give up on those for being too dangerous and focus more on keeping everyone else behind me. One does get me in front of Peach though after she stays in front through most of the final lap, and I have a pair of triple shells to make sure I could not be overtaken before the end. Frappe Snowland is pretty much the same with more drifting. I even managed to drift through the snowman field safely. Of course I have to shake too much and spin myself out later on, but for this one I'm in 1st for most of it, even get a big lead by the 3rd lap. Of course I lose it drifting into the corner of this wall and let them catch up. I have my shield of shells though and bananas left over from the last lap to keep my rivals away and let me win again. Now Choco Mountain I have to be especially careful with my drifting since I've already experienced how the mountainsides can destroy me if I get careless. And I do pretty well and mostly keep 1st. Until I get cocky at the last second and fly into the mountain at those last few pissing ramps and watch Peach and DK zoom over the finish, making me settle for 3rd and tie points with Peach. That just leaves Mario Raceway, where I really have to learn to drift without going off-road. But I spin out into this corner on the 1st lap, take myself out against this piranha plant on the 2nd, and just fail to catch up. However, DK and Peach were struggling too, and Wario and Toad take the first 2 places. All I had to do was finish before Peach, and that's enough points for the gold. Star Cup, where in Wario Stadium I start off with what may be the first discovered unintended shortcut in the game. Turning and timing a jump on the 1st ramp just right will allow me to jump over the wall and skip half the track. However, I was not good enough to perform the jump skip that takes me back over, so I had to do the rest of it normally. And then on the 2nd lap I pulled it off again. I fail it on the 3rd lap though, but I'm so far ahead that even the cheating AI can't catch up fast enough. Sherbet Land is just a case of doing well. I keep my lead throughout the entire 1st lap through just good play and avoiding any crashes. Then on the 2nd lap I hit the 1st penguin and drop to 4th. I fight my way back to 2nd by the final lap, but Mario gets his revenge for the last race and gained a ridiculous lead of his own, so I'm stuck with 2nd. Still leading on points by 6 though. With Royal Raceway, I try the skip where I jump off a huge boost ramp to the left and hit the wall to trick Lakitu into placing me further along the track than normal. It works, but the AI are so good that they've pretty much caught up to me by the time I've been put down anyway, so it makes no difference. Next time I do it, he places me a little bit further, but once again, the AI is too good. Next time, I just do the lap properly and finish with a bigger lead than I did on the laps where I tried the skip. Toad, who'd had 9 points by now, fell below 4th, and now I can finish Bowser's Castle in any position I want. Once again, the second hallway has added another thwomp to the next difficulty, for a total of 3 at the end. I actually get flattened by one, and despite everyone else smacking themselves into it, I'm immobile for so long that I fall down into last place. I get back to second by the start of the second lap, but Bowser has a huge lead. Then that same thwomp stops me in my tracks yet again. It's tough to drift in this place because there isn't much space for it, so I have a hard time catching up. Eventually, I just settle for finishing third since I'm getting that gold trophy regardless. That just leaves Special Cup and a certain DK Jungle Parkway skip that took me 10 minutes and a few quit-outs to accomplish. At the start of the race, I turn around and drive back into the cave at the end. I drive up the slope and jump through this seam on the wall to end up out of bounds. First time I aim wrong and just get placed on the map as normal. But on my third attempt I do it right, and Lakitu places me at the start of the cave and tricks the game into thinking I've done most of the lap already. Of course, I took so long that everyone else already did the lap normally in that time. Then I pull it off on my first try next lap and end up way in front. After that I decide not to take any risks and keep my lead and finish the final lap normally. Yoshi Valley isn't too interesting. I somehow get stuck in a wall in the first lap, but take first place back permanently when I save the gold mushroom for the end of the lap to cut off the entire road. Toad almost overtakes me right at the end, but I was holding out a banana for him. Then I drive into a banana myself. Thankfully I managed to still finish first. Banshee Boardwalk was nothing interesting until the final lap, where Toad makes me spin out and an attempt to catch up to him with a star results in me trying to hop that same corner and falling off track again, ending with me finishing the race in 6th place. And I do even worse next time but still finish 6th. On my third try, by the final lap, Peach has a lead that I can't catch up with, so me, Bowser and Toad are fighting over second. But a single banana peel ruins me so badly that I just barely manage to scrape 4th place. I lead by 4 points over Toad's 15, so what I need to win is to not finish more than 1 place behind Toad, and should I finish 4th again, Peach must not finish first. Good thing for Rainbow Road I spend the vast majority of the race in first with only a few times being overtaken and not for long. With that I finish 7 points in front and get all golds on 150cc. We then get the credits. Ever sometimes think a piece of music is just a bit too good for the situation it's placed? I always got that with this song. If I first heard it outside of this game with no context, I'd assume it was the ending theme to a long action-adventure game or RPG, not the silly Mustache Man racing game. I'm not complaining, I really like this track, it's second only to Rainbow Road for me. As a kid, there even being a credit sequence blew my mind. I got this game at 6, but was never good enough to get golds on anything past 100cc. It was when I was 9 and we got the internet that I saw various cheat websites list an extra cup for getting all golds on everything. So me and my brother spent a couple days working on that, while also getting in each other's way and driving each other up the wall, because we decided that trying to accomplish this in a 2-player Grand Prix was a good idea. So finally getting that 150cc Special Cup gold and seeing this entire sequence I never knew existed over the previous 3 years with new music was a big surprise. It even ends with Mario complimenting you, which is nice.
Hey, you very good!
I'm also rewarded with a new title screen containing the characters who didn't make the first one. My reward for this is Extra Mode. It's Mirror Mode, all tracks flipped while the racers are still at 150cc speed. This has become a mainstay reward for getting all golds on the 150cc's for the rest of the series, but as a kid I was actually disappointed that this was the reward. All the cheat websites at the time were referring to it as the Extra Cup, so I was expecting I'd unlock 4 new tracks that had remained hidden to me for 3 years. So you can imagine my disappointment to go to the Cup selection screen and see that nothing had changed. I didn't even notice Extra in the main menu, so for a few minutes I thought I'd been scammed. It even took me a bit when I finally did discover it to notice that the tracks were mirrored. There's something different here, but I can't figure out what. In fact, this was probably the first time I'd ever played a mirror mode in any game, so no wonder I wasn't expecting it. But these are just flipped 150cc tracks, except for one, and I don't think there's anything else I could add without making the video tedious, so... Now, Toad's Turnpike is the only track that is a completely different experience on Extra, and that's because it's awful now. Oh, I get the idea behind, well, the tracks are flipped, what if we also flip the direction of the traffic, but it is not enjoyable in the least. The vehicles now travel towards you to make it tougher to dodge them. Fair enough, but what it does in practice is make the track pretty much luck based. The amount of times I got hit by a vehicle only to not have the time to move out of the way of the second vehicle before it hits me too was too many. It makes the main challenge of Flower Cup just getting past Toad's Turnpike. My recording for Extra Flower Cup was 40 minutes long, and 24.5 of those was just trying to win Toad's Turnpike. And in the end I decided to just settle for third and try to make up the points on later tracks, which I did. And that's all gold trophies on all cups on all difficulties, but there's just a little bit more to do before I'm done. There are 3 staff ghosts to unlock and race in time trial mode. I can't save my own ghost as a single ghost takes up almost an entire controller pack, so my one Goemon save blocks that. The ghosts are on the 3 raceway tracks. Getting a good enough time will unlock the staff ghost to race. I'm just going to show a sped up version of all my wins against the staff ghost, as there's nothing else I can really add, apart from a Royal Raceway skip you see me pull off and fail in the same race. I should also point out that the ghost times will look different to non-PAL players due to the slightly slowed down game. And with that, Mario Kart 64 is complete. I really love this game. It has a great selection of tracks where, unlike other games, there are none that I dislike. While AI can be infuriating, I think it still has the best item balance in the series. And I love the sound of it. Some of the themes feel completely different to what we get from later games. It's part of the Mario series' early 3D games, which I've always had a fondness for how everything wasn't set in stone just yet. I remember going from Mario 64 to Kart 64 to Mario Party 1 and even Golf, seeing this mix of first attempts to translate elements and characters to 3D alongside a lot of original stuff that just never showed up again. That's not me declaring the N64 era of Mario superior to any others. It's just me having a lot of fondness for things introduced in this era. As for this game, whether or not it's my favourite Mario Kart, I can't say just yet, as there is at least one other contender that could come out on top. It's funny how Super Mario Bros., the game that has spent the longest in the top 10, is finally being nudged out, and it's by another Mario game. Speaking of long-lasters, Mortal Kombat 2 is finally being dethroned after being ranked number 1 longer than any other game, as this is my favourite game completed for this channel so far. But the video isn't quite done yet, as I have now reached 200 games completed for the channel. Looking through these last 100, I'm glad to have continued a good chunk of the series I introduced during the first 100. I also got some pretty big new series added to the list as well, with the likes of Final Fantasy, Pokemon, Dead or Alive and Kirby, along with smaller series with their own dedicated followings like Goemon and Fear Effect. I've also gone from 1 completed series to 6, although I admit that all 6 of those series contain just 2 games. I'll be completing some larger ones eventually. If I have some regrets looking through them, it's how big a percentage of these games have been arcade games, especially beat-em-ups. There are a few reasons for that. One is that many series I would prefer to start at the beginning, and so many huge series started in arcades. The other is that for the most part I've been getting a video out every 5 days, and I need shorter games to buy for time writing scripts for the longer games. And I will admit that beat-em-ups have become a bit of a crutch for me, as I find them very easy to write. I'd like to rely on them less going into the next 100, but I still have a few left over. I would like to do another episode like episode 30 someday, where I had a much longer episode than normal, but they were all shorter videos on shorter games, but to make up for it the videos were 2 days apart. That could be a good place to use some of them up. My other regret is for returning series from the first 100. With the exceptions of Harry Potter and Dukes of Hazzard, I was hoping to bring back every series that still had sequels from the first 100. That didn't work out for a few reasons. First is simply not owning or having access to other games from every series. The other is that I found that planning things too strictly doesn't work out, and if I set a goal, I will get distracted. Here's an example. I was wanting for the next 100 games to be 2/3 games from returning series, but when I got started on that, I've since done far more new series instead. There was one big change near the end of these last 100 and which will continue into the next, and that is use of emulators. Now that I have a much better computer than I started with, I've been able to run emulators and screen capture without the computer slowing to a crawl. I've mainly used this for arcade games that never had any kind of re-release, but you've also seen me use it for consoles that are either very difficult or impossible to record from, like the DS or Game Gear. I've also taken for looking into it for games I own and can record. For example, my PSP is a big pain to work with, so near the end of my still in progress Final Fantasy II playthrough, I will swap from direct PSP capture to emulator footage. I don't want to rely on emulators too much when I don't need to, as I am still a collector. I like collecting games and I would like to put my collection to use. However, I've also had to realise that this rule I had before has been stressing me out and holding me back from starting series I've been wanting to cover for ages, due to certain games only being available through extremely expensive 30-year-old second-hand copies without any kind of modern re-release. Plus, when I want to cover multiple versions of a game in one video, I tend to be held back by certain parts I want to cover being insanely expensive. As much as I am glad to own Mortal Kombat 2 on the Master System, paying £70 so it amounted to about 3 minutes in the video was just irresponsible. An example is Lufia and the Fortress of Doom. I wanted to start the series, but this game has never been re-released. It was never released in PAL territories at all, and the surviving US copies are just too much. So I played through on an emulator and you can expect it sometime in 2024, hopefully earlier rather than later. Speaking of new series you can expect to see in the next 100, I'll give you a couple crumbs and say that along with Lufia, Ys and Mega Man will be making their first appearances on this channel. So in terms of the success of the channel, I can't remember the exact amount of subscribers I had back on the Tekken 2 video, but it was around the early 20s, meaning with the 46 I have now at the time of writing, I've more than doubled. Still haven't reached any of the subscriber milestones I set out in the video on my channel's main page, but it's still progress. I'll admit I do question why my most viewed videos are the ones they are, my music ranking of Pandora's Tower having more than twice the views of the next most viewed. Considering how niche that game is, it's still pulling in more views than anything else always surprises me. I will admit that I thought I would have given up and stopped before reaching 200 games. I did talk about how demoralising it could be when I talked about reaching 100 games, and it still can be when a video doesn't even crack double-digit views, but it hasn't bothered me as much for a couple reasons. First is that videos are now breaking double digits more often than not. It doesn't sound like much, but it's a lot more than I'm used to. Even the subscriber count has been increasing much more frequently than I'm used to, even if it can sometimes just be by one every few weeks. The second is a bit more personal. These last 4 years, starting shortly after episode 4 went up, have been the worst 4 years of my life. I've mentioned my mother's cancer before, then came the pandemic and lockdown, and I've spoken about my breakup and learning I was cheated on to a level I start to regret more and more the further away I get from those 2 videos. Not for what I said and how I felt, but for letting such a low point get me to talk about stuff more personal than I would like to put out there. But for the last 2.5 years there's been a new, unrelated thing. I don't want to go into detail, it's still going on and having an effect now, but it has gotten a lot worse over the last year, starting around the time I made the Yoshi Story video and continuing to get worse. I said in one of the Pokemon videos that making the December 22 to January 23 videos was the toughest time I've had making these videos while keeping the schedule I want, and that is due to the same thing I'm referring to now. But this current batch of videos I'm working on now has ended up at an even worse time. Basically, recording the games and making these videos to the 5-day schedule has kind of kept me going. I've never really had a creative outlet like this before, and it has helped me keep some kind of structure while things continue to get worse off camera. Of course things get in the way, like when I needed to take a break earlier in the year, or having to push this episode back 15 days thanks to getting COVID. Actually, that's the part I get frustrated with more than anything else. I really wish I could have videos up more often than 5 days apart. I wish I could have finished 400 games by now, but the physical and mental limitations of my human body make that impossible. I was so annoyed when I got COVID just as I was about to start making the next 2 months' videos. I needed my outlet at a time things were bad, and even now as I'm past it, it's still slowing me down. Both the effects of COVID and the situation at home. It's basically meant I've entered the month where I make these videos already worn out. I've had to consider making December and January's videos 6 days apart to cover for how long I'm being slowed down. I'm even having to consider having no videos go up in January and having another, albeit shorter break, after the end of this episode. By the time this video goes up, you'll already long know if I've had to do this. But really, that was just a lot of words to say that I'm still here, I'm still enjoying it, and I am determined to keep going despite everything. And I am especially determined to reach 300 games completed. Maybe I'll even reach my smallest subscriber milestone and be able to make my first promised video of those. Either way, I'll keep going.